Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they hold guitars. They reminded everyone that even the ordinary can echo. With a message to the world, we are all heroes. This is Xdinary Heroes. Studio J was founded by JYP under JYP Entertainment in 2015, envisioned as a label that would focus on musical integrity rather than idol image. It became home to artists like Day 6, proving that bands could exist and thrive within a company built on pop acts. By 2020, the studio wanted to expand that legacy with something heavier, louder, and more experimental. A rock band that could push JYP's boundaries even further. Xdinary Heroes were formed through individual auditions and casting by JYP Entertainment. The members came from different paths. One after appearing on a TV show, another through a band contest, some through standard trainee auditions. A few were initially trained for a dance group before being shifted toward the new band project. Each story was different, but they converged under a single purpose: to create a rock band with a heavier sound than Day 6. In November 2021, JYP Entertainment officially announced the group's name and began unveiling the members one by one. Jungsu, jooyeon, gaon, od, gunil, and junhan were introduced not as typical idols, but as musicians. Each reveal showcasing their instruments, songwriting, and live playing instead of choreography or visuals. Their name, Xdinary Heroes, short for Extraordinary Heroes, carried a simple message. Anyone can be a hero. You didn't need perfection, fame, or power, just purpose. And soon, that message would need a sound. Xdinary Heroes debuted with Happy Death Day on December 6. The song was designed to be honest. A song about falseness, how society celebrates things that mean nothing, how people wear masks until they forget who they are. The MV was filmed with harsh lighting, straightforward sets, the band surrounded by noise. The distorted guitars were meant to be necessary. The vocals didn't smooth themselves out. The song meant for those who felt overlooked, pressured, or hurt by expectations. People crushed by perfection, who needed a song that admitted the chaos they carried and told them it was okay to exist loudly. Some called it too raw. Others called it brilliant. Xdinary Heroes called it honest. After debut, the normal path to success is clear. Release music constantly, build momentum, chase trends. Xdinary Heroes went quiet. They took time. By playing in small venues, they let their live sound develop without rushing into the next recording. Their growing fandom called themselves villains, not ironically, but as acknowledgement about being misunderstood and turning that into power. Together, they built a community that lived by its message, the message of their music, that the world doesn't decide your worth. You do. 7 months later, they released their first extended play, Hello World, a way of saying, we're still here, and so are you. With a total of 6 tracks, the sound was clearer, the direction was stronger. The lyrics carried hope without losing edge. The song moved beyond the raw destruction of Happy Death Day into something more shaped, a reminder that being yourself doesn't mean standing alone. The concept of this song was straightforward. This is who we are, not who you want us to be, not who we thought we should be, who we actually are. From this comeback, it's clear that every riff and lyric carried new intent, a statement that growth doesn't mean compromise, it means sharpening who you already are. And with that established, the band decided to explore something darker. Welcome. By late 2022, the band released Overload, Overload was about pressure, the feeling of being too much, of having too much inside, of systems designed to contain you that can't actually contain you. Among the tracks in Overload, the title song Haircut stood out most. It used a simple act, cutting hair, as a metaphor for severing ties with old versions of yourself. The lyrics spoke about slicing away thoughts that weighed you down, reclaiming control, and learning to start again, even when it hurts. It was a message for anyone trapped under pressure or perfection. The song spiraled instead of resolving. The production felt intentionally overwhelming. It was the band asking, what happens when you stop trying to be comfortable? What happens when you embrace the parts of yourself that don't fit? In Korea, it created conversation, not all of it positive. Some critics questioned whether this direction alienated potential listeners. The band's answer was implicit. We're not interested in potential listeners. We're interested in people who actually hear what we're saying. The villain arc had begun, and it would define their sound for the next 2 years. By mid-2023, Xdinary Heroes released Deadlock and Livelock, twin projects connected not just by sound, but by philosophy. Where Overload had embodied raw defiance, these two albums turned that emotion into reflection. The concepts were drawn from computer science. A deadlock occurs when multiple processes wait endlessly for one another, unable to move forward. A livelock happens when processes keep reacting and changing, but never make progress. Both represent cycles of resistance. In Deadlock, the band explored the feeling of being stuck between good and evil. Freakin' Bad, the lead track, captured the tension of frustration without resolution. It was loud, fast, and angry. The visuals reflected this. Rebellious, school-like imagery, students in chaos, trapped inside a system that punishes difference. The music echoed that conflict, but underneath the distortion, there was clarity, a refusal to let paralysis define them. Then came Livelock, the continuation of that story. Instead of being completely stuck, this album expressed the exhaustion of constant motion, of fighting endlessly, and feeling like nothing changes. Break the Break represented the band's escape from the loop that Deadlock and Livelock described, a moment where they refused to stay confined by fear, doubt, or expectation. A statement. To stop overthinking, to stop waiting for permission, and to move without hesitation. Together, Deadlock and Livelock painted a complete portrait of struggle, from stillness to endless movement, from frustration to awareness. The message was simple but heavy. Life isn't about escape, it's about understanding where you are, even when you feel trapped. These records prove that Xdinary Heroes were documenting what it feels like to live inside the loop and still refuse to give up. On October 6, to commemorate Livelock, Xdinary Heroes announced their first tour, the Break the Break World Tour. It began on the 3rd of November 2023 in Seoul and concluded in Bangkok on the 31st of March 2024. For the band, the tour was proof of transformation. They were no longer the 6 rookies rehearsing in a quiet studio. They were now leading thousands in the same defiant energy that started their story. Every city echoed the same realization. Xdinary Heroes, breaking free from the system. After the Break the Break World Tour, Xdinary Heroes entered 2024 facing both exhaustion and momentum. Their next project, Troubleshooting, was a reset. Thematically, it explored mistakes, errors, and the process of repairing what breaks. The title itself borrowed from technical language, framing failure not as an endpoint but a system check, a necessary step in progress. The music fused their hard rock roots with cleaner digital elements, reflecting a group comfortable with experimentation but still anchored in truth. This era marked a turning point in tone. Less rebellion, more reflection. It was about learning how to grow without losing what made them different. Following Troubleshooting, the open beta series expanded Xdinary Heroes' creative world. Presented as a sequence of concept performances rather than a traditional release, it invited listeners into their testing ground. The title is a play on open beta, the phase in game development where players test unfinished systems. Musically, open beta mixed grunge, pop punk, and alternative influences, showing that imperfection could coexist with mastery. More than a promotion, it was participation, an era about connection rather than performance. But connection comes with weight. When you open the door to your process, you also reveal your limits. The vulnerability that made open beta inspiring became the foundation for what came next. A record that looked inward instead of outward, asking what happens when the pursuit of growth starts to take its toll. With Live and Fall, Xdinary Heroes captured the emotional aftermath of growth, the fear of losing what they'd built. The title played on the phrase "live and learn," suggesting that sometimes you fall before understanding why you stood in the first place. If Troubleshooting was about fixing systems and open beta was about testing limits, Live and Fall was about accepting gravity. Understanding that growth isn't linear, and sometimes falling is how you stay grounded. Musically, it returned to heavier textures, distorted bass lines, syncopated drums, and emotional vocals that felt closer to their debut than anything since. Transitioning into 2025, their sixth EP, Beautiful Mind, was released on March 24. In Beautiful Mind, the heroes were still fighting, but this time, the enemy was themselves. Where earlier projects rebelled against an external system, this album turned the fight inward. The concept centered on resistance, chaos, and self-confrontation. These tracks were a transformation of conflict. Beautiful Life and its music video depicted the members battling their own reflections, bloody, raw, and symbolic of an internal war. To support the release of the EP, on March 24, the band announced their second world tour, the Beautiful Mind Tour. It began in Seoul on May 2 and concluded in San Jose on August 16. For the band, this tour was a celebration of survival, of growth, of a philosophy finally understood. Each show felt like a reunion between people who had grown up together through noise. Then came recognition on a global stage. On March 18, it was revealed that Xdinary Heroes would join the lineup for Lollapalooza 2025, set for July 31. A symbolic moment where their sound, once confined to practice rooms, now stood beside global rock acts. A band that once defied the system was now invited to lead within it. And the music kept coming. On July 7, their sixth digital single, Fire, followed by the release of Break the Darkness on July 18 as part of the soundtrack for a K-drama, The Nice Guy. Both songs carried the matured tone of Beautiful Mind. Still intense, but more deliberate, exploring what it means to burn and rebuild rather than simply destroy. Each of their works in 2025 showed a band no longer asking who they were, but showing the world what they'd become. And now, the story circles back. After months since their last release, Xdinary Heroes prepare to return with Love to Death. We've seen the mood film, unsettling imagery of extraction, of removal, of something being solved but not actually solved. Maybe a warning. Love and death are not separate. They occupy the same space. They require the same commitment. The album will contain 7 tracks. Every track is written and composed by the members, continuing their legacy of control and authenticity. The sound is heavier, but the meaning is clearer. Being extraordinary was never about being above anyone else. It was about being true to what they played. And that comes from internal belief, not external expectation. Their journey began with noise, and it will continue with purpose. Xdinary Heroes aim to be musicians who make meaning out of noise. They found purpose in what was real, not what was expected. They found something extra in the ordinary. Everyone has the power to create, to stand, to inspire. Everyone can be a hero. Xdinary Heroes dared to be bold. Will you?